Alright, hey YouTube, how's it going? It's Max. Today I'm going to talk about this character that I have, probably the most fleshed out character I've ever kind of created, named Tira Misu. And Tira Misu is currently the character I've been using in Dungeons and Dragons for the past 5 years, but I was really kind of doing like a kind of self introspection to really figure out when this character kind of came into my head and sort of tried to put it all together to document it into this video. So this will be the first 5 years that I can think of before I even started using the character in Dungeons and Dragons. So it this video will probably get split up into multiple videos, so probably the time up until 2017, and then maybe I'll make a video in the future from 2017 to 2022 just to kind of document I guess the timeline of this. um yeah, I it's kind of been kind of nostalgic, kind of like revisiting some of these points in my life. And a quick disclaimer, I don't know if I'm actually I mean, this is all coming from like memory and stuff. I have some like written documentation, but um, I could be missing out a lot of things. At the end of the day, this is all kind of like subjective anyway. It's not like I'm doing a historical account on something that's like important. So this is just kind of, me kind of thinking about this topic and trying to be as accurate as possible. Um, but yeah, without further ado, I'll just start. So I want to say that the present, iteration of Tira definitely, uh, at the 2017 timeline, that definitely changed Tira, I think, quite a bit. But my first kind of thoughts of like where Tira came from was probably sometime in 2012, after I was first kind of watching the Harry Potter, getting really into Harry Potter. I really wanted to make this kind of magic school, and I called it the Mannheim Academy. And the one distinction I really wanted to make from Mannheim, as opposed to Harry Potter at the time, Harry Potter was this magic school where you learn like transfigurations and charms and all that stuff. At this Mannheim Academy, I was really influenced by Pokemon growing up, so I had all these ideas of like different types of people, kind of like, if you could imagine like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but for like, you know, um, like witches, wizards, but like Avatar benders at the same time. So there would be all these different kind of subjects that would be different elements of magic, and so one of the kind of uh, I guess you could say, exercises that I would do would be to try to come up with a boy and a girl character for each elemental type. And I think subconsciously I was thinking of Terra from Teen Titans because, like, none of the personality was really based off Terra, but I was just coming up with names, and I like the idea of Terra because it's kind of like terrain. So Terra. Um, was probably, I had this character named Terra. And it was just a very simple character name that was tied to earth bending or earth magic. Uh, and that was pretty much the entire identity of the character. And there were some for like all the other elements like fire, ice, water, electric, all that stuff. But I remember specifically there was a girl, uh, witch, wizard, bender that was earth named Terra. And it wasn't until, um, so this was like one separate kind of thing. And then my brother used to play games like WWE, and we had this game called Soul Calibur. And I wouldn't play them to, do the fighting. I mostly just would play them to make characters. And they were like really good character creation video games at the time. And this was like so long ago, like it was just like a different time to make characters. I feel like there's so many things to make characters these days, but that's like really like I think this is like before I even like bought myself a laptop computer, so this it was like playing on the PlayStation or something, just playing these games. I think it was like the PS3. And so in this game, Soul Calibur, there was a character named Tira, Tira, and she's kind of like this Harley Quinn character. And I don't really know a whole lot about her, but I think that's the only other time I've ever seen the name Tira. And I remember kind of stealing the name from that character in Soul Calibur 5. So here I was having this character who was this earthbender, and it was named Terra, but I just wasn't really sure anything else about it, and then I had this other name kind of in the back of my head named Tira. And so there's this third part. So the third part is that during this time, I'm also playing games like NHL and the NHL series. So I think it was like probably NHL 2012 or something at this time. And I have this. I probably mentioned this in the Uno card hockey video, but I have this team on NHL that I kind of make routinely, and it's a bunch of just pun names. So there's a character that was named like Joe Kerr and Tom Ato and Teriyaki, and pretty much all these names that were just mostly food puns. So somewhere along the lines, I have this character named Terra, and I'm thinking Tira Misu, and because it's a pun name, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could put it on this pun team because it's I think at 2012 there was you could start making like female hockey players at the time. So I had this character named Tara Misu who was a hockey player who was just another normal person. So it was like this earth mage for a magic school, but also this hockey player. And I kind of, the reason I had like this pun team, I used to play like RuneScape all the time, and in RuneScape, all the NPCs are named after like puns. So especially the ones that come to mind are like the Knights of Falador, where their names are all like Sir Tiffy Cashin and Sir Amik Vars, which is certification, and ceramic vase. So there's all these like pun names. So that was kind of the inspiration of the puns. So I have tiramisu, and I don't really like Terra as a name for tiramisu because for some reason I just didn't like how there were 5 letters instead of it was 5 letters for the first name and 4 letters for the last name, and there was this like conflict going on in my head where it was like it's so close to tiramisu but it's not quite tiramisu. And I was like, should I just make it tiramisu because there's this character named Tira? And is that too close to the dessert? And for some reason, I kept thinking about like, am I like copywriting something? I don't know. Like it's just like that was sort of the thoughts going on in my head. So really, uh, it was just this, you know, character that was either Terra or Tira, maybe sometimes it was Tera, so it was just a bunch of different like variants of that, but nothing was really solidified for the longest time. And so yeah, basically I ended up going with tiramisu after a while, and it was one of these characters that I just always had in my mind for a long time because of that kind of name discrepancy of like I don't know what to call it or call her. And so I ended up going with tiramisu, like the dessert. And that got me like thinking like, I really have to like put some time into this character because here she is, this earth mage, but also this hockey player. And this dessert that is like sweet cream and sweet sugar and like egg whites and stuff like that. And then but then the dessert is also this like bitter like espresso and like dark chocolate and stuff like that. So I felt like I had to really like flesh out that personality or something because it just like was kind of nagging at me that there was like this like earth, I don't know, like earth mage didn't really have anything to do with tiramisu, and that's why I was kind of like, should it be Terra because of earth mage, or tiramisu like chocolate and dessert? So I was really like, maybe I should lean more into this whole light versus dark, this like sweetness versus bitter kind of aesthetic. So I kind of put the earth mage part on hold for a bit and was focusing on this kind of like, why is she called tiramisu, like the dessert? And sort of like this idea of this, like when I think of light versus dark, I think of almost like a fallen angel kind of thing, sort of like Morgana from League of Legends. But at the time, I don't think I really played League of Legends. I think I started playing League of Legends in 2016, and between like 2012 and 2013, 2014, it was really, I had this like I was sort of like trying to figure out myself from like a religious standpoint. So I really liked this idea of like the devil being a possible good guy. And what I mean by this is like, when I think about like, you think about history, like you learn about history in school and stuff, which was around this time where I'm learning more about sociology and anthropology and just world history at like a more advanced level. You kind of start learning about how the winners of wars start to tell history. And so it got me thinking about this whole concept of like, since the Bible is written by I guess like God's followers, you don't really ever hear like the devil's perspective. And I'm not saying like, I'm not like a devil worshiper or anything like that. It's just a thought that like kind of I thought was interesting at the time. So the thought process was like, what if this like girl comes from this society that's portrayed as devils, and they don't really get to tell their story because the winners of this war that occurred are these like, they think of themselves as lawful good zealots who are just doing their God's will, but they're really like otherizing this entire culture of people, and they're being portrayed as devils, and they're like the lowest class in the society. And that's just kind of like the inspiration of this. And during the time, I was kind of like probably in my like late teens, somewhere around there, like early late teens. And because I think 2012, I was probably like, um I don't know, like 16, 17 or so. So pretty much, I kind of had like this, like, I was questioning religion, a bit angsty at times. And I think that like this whole like thought process of religion was like pretty crucial for my formative years as a whole, kind of extending a little bit before that as well. But yeah, so it got me interested in thinking about like, what if she came from this oppressed culture? And I started thinking about that a little bit more, and I was really inspired by like the Salem witch trials. And I thought that was a good time period because of the whole like original inspiration of her being this earth mage. Um, and the Salem witch trials were kind of like, they thought people were witches and would burn them at the stake. So I'm like, that kind of works with this idea. Also, the people, the pilgrims who moved to the New England area, they were of this like kind of Puritan belief. It was like very fundamentalist in a way, and a bit hypocritical as well, because here they are being persecuted back in England, and now they're persecuting back now in the New World. So I was kind of going with this idea of like the area she's coming from, Tira. She's just being like persecuted by these people who think that they're the good guys, who are really just the winners of the conflicts going on, and they're writing history to spread this mass hysteria of Tira's culture. Um, and so I called this culture, that Tira is from, the Olabaid, and this is just kind of like Diablo backwards. And I thought that was kind of fitting because, when you think of like devil's tongue, devil's speak, it's usually like speaking backwards. So it was really like kind of like, not a very complicated language to kind of come up with, but pretty much all of their language would have just been like backwards. And this is something that I just thought was kind of like fun to play around with. And when I've done D&D campaigns that involve this old maid culture, most of the puzzles would just be like the text backwards and you could read it. So it's one of those things where like it's you could learn the language, or you could just kind of like it's kind of like a puzzle to solve. So anyway, that is about the old maid culture, and I really liked ideas of. I think I already talked about like it's like a Puritan area, this fundamentalist type hypocrisy. Um, I like this idea of almost like spooky vibes, like Halloween esque. And I think like when I think of like New England, I think of this um, some woods and like rocky coastlines and just very like autumnal. Like they'd have like really good, like really vibrant like color changes in the trees and stuff like that. Like just like a very East Coast of the United States kind of vibe. I also like town names like Salem witch trials, and like Plymouth Rock. This almost very English kind of vibe. I like this. I was starting to get like, how would she look? And so I was thinking of like maybe she had like this like ghostly white skin and like very dark hair, and it's almost like I wouldn't like say vampire aesthetics, but like kind of like a similar facade, but like not really like the whole blood sucking thing. I wasn't really like too into that. I thought that was a little bit almost because I always saw her as like kind of like this younger kind of person, so I didn't really I thought like vampires and like sucking blood was like almost a bit like risque and stuff, like a little bit not really appropriate for this kind of character that I was kind of going for. But I really like this idea of her being like something to do with like light and dark. And I was kind of drawn to this idea of life versus death. And so there was this idea in my mind. It wasn't really like a concrete idea, but I like this idea of her being almost this. She plays with life and death in a way, sort of like a necromancer. But I think this was kind of like before I was really like into like this whole idea of like what a necromancer actually was. So I don't know. I feel like I wasn't like a super fantasy person before D&D. I was more of like playing like hockey and playing The Sims and stuff like that. So I never really played a whole lot of like games like D&D that were fantasy related, but I there was something kind of drawing me to this like spooky Halloween, spooky scary skeletons kind of vibe. So I was thinking like bone white, ghost white, kind of skin, dark hair. Um, and ultimately I think like the character's goals were kind of like she was this lonely character who was very insecure and very confused, with all these people kind of telling these stories of like how her people are these evil people, and she's on this quest to find this capital T truth. And like because like everyone's kind of like telling her she's wrong all the time, even though she thinks she's right because she's like uncovering these mysteries. It's sort of making her depressed over time. And I think this is sort of like a parallel to how I was feeling like kind of growing up in like a religious household, being someone who's questioning religion. And religion is kind of this thing that you can't question. It's kind of just like this absolute truth to some people. And so I felt like, this was like a good character to really sort of define myself uh, with these feelings. Um, and I remember there's like a lot of like suppressed arrogance. So part of me really wanted to give her like this confident kind of voice, like Hermione Granger, but a little bit more soft spoken instead of like bossy. Like I feel like Hermione is kind of like this bossy character, but she's very like intelligent, very smart, and I kind of wanted there was some inspiration behind that, but I wanted it to be more like almost like this facade that she's very focused on pronouncing every single word, and like speaking very particularly and very with a lot of like conscientiousness, um, not really stepping on toes, being very like tactful in how she says things. Um, so in This is kind of like leading into like the Sims thing. So like when I was playing Sims, you get to define your characters with all these different like these personality traits. So I made her in like got some inspiration from Soul Calibur. Would make her in the hockey. I would make her in Sims, and Sims was really a good tool to really flesh out those personality traits and like see the interactions. And I remember there were like traits in Sims that kind of draw to me. So I think brooding was one of the traits, like kind of loner, um, very intelligent. I think genius was a trait, maybe perfectionist or creative or something like that. Just traits like that, and she would be just very like isolated. And whenever I would put her in like games or something, she would just be kind of like always doing her own thing, and like writing. So, because writing was just a good skill to, I guess, make money, and you could, in The Sims. So she kind of got this. She just was like a writer, and I kind of like identified with that because I like to write. So there was just a lot of like, uh, I started to develop like a lot of attachments for this character, even though like I made like a bunch of characters in Sims and I had like a bunch of characters, and it was one of those things where like I have like this group of like kind of characters already that I can think of as like the inner circle of groups. Like when I want to use characters for something, I usually use this like inner circle of characters. But I found myself more using Tira in this in place of some of these characters. So it was this thing that like she didn't really fit in with the group of characters because they were all like one thing. But was just like growing on me as this character to start using more and more often, leading up to like 2017 and stuff like that. So yeah, she was like this late addition to the cast of my characters, but I think just that um, personality traits and stuff of being this like lonely, misunderstood person um, really kind of made me use her more and kind of that kind of stuff. So I know we're at 22 minutes already, but I still got quite a bit to talk about. That's why this is probably gonna be multiple videos. But approaching 2017, my friends and I, well, actually, they were like, "Hey, do you want to play this game called Dungeons and Dragons?" And it's one of those games I never really thought about playing before. Like I said, I wasn't really super into fantasy that can remember. And I remembered it as being this like kind of nerdy game that you played back in like the 70s or 80s or something. I didn't even know people still played that. But apparently, like in like pop culture, D&D was kind of making this like Renaissance revival kind of thing, where like there's it was in Stranger Things. Dan Harmon, who made Community and Rick and Morty, which was popular at the time, made this show about it, and then Critical Role was blowing up, and these are all these voice actors that were in popular things. So we were like, yeah, let's try it out. And I'm a complete noob to D&D at the time. I don't know any of the rules, and I'm seeing these textbooks, and there's like hundreds of pages of rules. So I'm trying to read as much as I can because I have this kind of like if I'm gonna play a game with someone and stuff like that, like D&D, and D, and I'm getting into it, I'm gonna like try to my best to like kind of understand it. And this we had plenty of months to kind of learn it before we started playing. So I was going through the rules, trying to read what I could, and I'm getting this vibe that you really have to kind of build like a team chemistry comp for the thing. So usually, I think we were playing like League of Legends by this time, and most of the people I played League of Legends with really liked that were playing D&D. Like to play like carry roles or just big bruiser types. So I was like, I'll play it safe and pick a support character. Because I feel like no one's gonna want to be like a support. So I was thinking, I've built up this character named Tira over the years. I'm going to, try her out and try and flesh her out in this thing, since I can only pick one in the inner group of characters that I used. We're all kind of like interacting with each other. They were all part of a friend group. Tira was this isolated person, so I felt like that would probably be the best person to do this campaign as. So, and it was interesting too, because people were coming up with character names like, there was Margaret Scratcher and Dirty Dan, Beach Fooker, Esther Jin. So all these kind of like pun names. So I felt like Tira Misu was just a natural addition to the cast, where some of the other names were a bit more, um, not as like memeable. So it kind of just made it seem like a natural addition to the cast of D&D characters. Um, and so, yeah, it's D&D is just one of those games where you never really know how it's going to go until you start playing it. So I was trying to figure out like, so I came up with this idea to play a support, um, and there was two different really support roles that I could kind of like identify right off the top. There was the cleric and the bard. And the cleric, uh, based on what I was researching, it seemed like all clerics had to be religious. And one of the things that kind of identified Tira was that she wasn't religious. So I felt like cleric at the time could not be a class that she could be, because that would kind of go against her whole vibe. Um, so I chose originally for her to be a bard. And so I'm looking through all the stuff. You got to choose an instrument. So I'm like, maybe violin, but they don't have violins. So I'm like, oh, they have a viola. So maybe I'll do viola. And why I was trying to do viola was because violas and violins, they're kind of like this. They seem like this like sophisticated kind of classical. They can be very beautiful sounding, but they can also be very creepy and kind of like nails on a chalkboard kind of thing. And I felt like that was kind of the spooky element of being a bard. And I was like, maybe she could be like this necromancer type. But like there were so many like kind of rules for D&D about like what spells you could get and this and that I was really trying. It was very hard to kind of uh, come up with a character that was in depth when you don't really know the rules of the game. You've never played a game before, and so there were a lot of like mistakes that I was making while creating a character. That over the years, my group was able to accommodate like me changing my class a bit and stuff like that, but I probably have to get into that in a different video, because that's like 5 years of stuff that uh, I don't really have time for in this video. But yeah, essentially at the beginning, she wasn't going to be a cleric, because she was going into this game as an atheist, even though gods in the world were 100% real, and I wasn't really sure if that was like something that was like legitimate or not legitimate, because again, you don't really know the rules of the game until you start playing it. So that was kind of the character. She's this bard who plays this viola atheist, and the whole backstory is something I'll save for the next video too. But also you're picking a race, and I didn't know like all the race lore, because each race has its own lore. So I was trying to look at it, but like there's so many things that you miss over before you start playing, that you kind of just learn through experience. So I picked like halfling at the beginning, and the reason for halfling was more so from a metagame standpoint. Like I really was like, oh, maybe I should like embrace one of these races, and I really liked the lucky feature I remember from halfling, and it felt like very like, oh, I can see her as being this lucky because she's like kind of smart and stuff like that. Maybe that will help, like her rolls will be better or whatever. So and I like the idea of her being like this small kind of person who, but I didn't realize how small halflings actually were. So yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of retconning throughout the campaign, and she's in a completely different spot nowadays than she was 5 years ago, and definitely in a completely different spot than she was 10 years ago. But I could talk on and on about this, but we're approaching the half hour point, so I think this is probably a good stopping point for the first 5 years of Tira. I'll probably make a part two, documenting the next 5 years. But yeah, it's just a character that's been pretty influential in my life, and I thought I'd share it. And stay tuned for more if you find this interesting. Even though this is just a long rant about like an OC or whatever. But yeah, stay tuned. I'll see you later days. Bye bye.